Family means forever. The words on the red banner stretched across my living room wall hit me like a punch in the stomach. Through the window, I counted 57 cars parked on my street and the adjacent ones. Cars I recognized. Uncles, cousins, distant relatives I hadn't seen in years. All celebrating at my house. The house I didn't know was being used for a party. My name is Jesse, I'm 31 years old, and I just got back from a medical conference in Seattle a week earlier than planned. For 5 years, I've dedicated my life to researching innovative treatments for pancreatic cancer at the Boston Medical Research Institute. I was supposed to present my preliminary results on Sunday, but our team managed to speed up the schedule. I thought it would be a nice surprise to get home early. The surprise was all mine. I pulled my car over 2 blocks away and watched the invasion of my property. Loud music blared from open windows. Children ran through the yard I had spent months tending. A barbecue chef I didn't recognize was using my new electric grill on the porch. My cell phone vibrated. A message from my younger brother, Marcus. Hope you're enjoying Seattle. The house is very quiet here. Quiet. I took a deep breath and walked toward my own front door, carrying my conference bag and an award I had received for my research. An award that no one in my family would appreciate. They never did. The door was unlocked. Of course. I crossed the entryway, where coats and bags belonging to strangers hung from every hook and occupied every available surface. The sound of animated conversation and laughter echoed throughout the house. Jesse. My cousin Melissa's high-pitched voice cut through the air. You're back early. The conversations gradually subsided as people noticed my presence. Familiar faces and some I could barely place turned in my direction. An awkward wave of silence spread through the room. My mother, Sandra, emerged from the kitchen carrying a tray of sandwiches. Her eyes widened when she saw me. Jesse, honey. What a surprise. Her tone was forced cheerful. I thought you weren't coming back until Sunday. We finished early, I replied, keeping my voice under control. Can I ask what's going on here? It's the Carter-Williams family reunion, exclaimed my Uncle Robert, approaching with a beer in his hand. 40 years since the Florida cousins were here. Isn't that fantastic? Fantastic wasn't exactly the word I would have used. Marcus appeared from the direction of the kitchen, his face running through a rapid succession of expressions. Surprise, guilt, and then the defensive arrogance I knew so well. Brother, I'm so glad you made it. He moved in for a hug, which I subtly avoided. We decided to organize this at the last minute when the Florida folks confirmed they could come. Last minute. I looked around, noticing elaborate decorations, professionally arranged tables, and what had clearly required weeks of planning. This doesn't look last minute, Marcus. An uncomfortable silence hung over the immediate group. Well, my mother quickly interjected, you were so busy with your important work that we didn't want to bother you with family details. Important work. Her tone carried that familiar note of disdain disguised as admiration. I had just received international recognition for research that could revolutionize the treatment of one of the most aggressive forms of cancer. But to my family, it was always just work, something that kept me away from the really important things, like family gatherings that I was never consulted about organizing. How many people are here? I asked. 57. My Aunt Patricia announced proudly. We got almost everyone together. It's historic. 57 people in my house. Using my space, my electricity, my facilities. People who barely knew me taking advantage of my forced hospitality. And then I noticed something that made my blood run cold. The door to my second-floor office was open. My private office, where I kept years of research, confidential documents, and delicate equipment. Who's using my office? My voice came out tenser than I intended. Oh, some of the older cousins needed a quiet place to rest, Marcus explained casually. Uncle Frank wasn't feeling well, so... I didn't finish listening. I ran up the stairs 2 at a time, my heart racing with every step. The door to my sanctuary was wide open. Inside, I found 3 men I vaguely recognized as distant relatives, one sleeping in my reading chair, another rummaging through my medical books, and the third was leafing through my confidential research folder. Excuse me, I said, my voice cutting like steel. You can leave my office. Now. The man with my folder had the decency to look ashamed. "Sorry, kid. Just looking around. Interesting work you do. Confidential work. Protected by non-disclosure agreements. Research that could be worth millions if it fell into the wrong hands." After I kicked them out, I locked the door and leaned against it, trying to process the violation of my privacy. That's when I noticed something that would change everything. One of Marcus's financial folders was open on my desk. Collection letters, foreclosure notices, and bank statements painted a devastating picture of financial trouble. And there, highlighted in yellow, was a detailed plan to convince me to sell my share of the house. If you're enjoying this story of family invasion and manipulation, be sure to subscribe to the channel, because what I discovered next would reveal that this reunion wasn't just about family nostalgia. It was about money. My money. And while my family celebrated downstairs, believing I had bought into the last-minute meeting story, I was discovering that I had been carefully deceived by people I should have trusted more than anyone. But they didn't know one crucial thing about me. I wasn't the passive Jesse who always accepted being left out anymore. And what I was about to discover would turn this seemingly innocent invasion into something much more sinister. I returned to the first floor carrying Marcus's briefcase, my mind processing every devastating detail I had read. $58,000 in credit card debt. 3 foreclosure notices. A loan denied by the bank last week. And most revealing of all, a handwritten document detailing a strategy to pressure me into selling my half of the house. "Persuade Jesse that it would be better to invest the money in something more lucrative," read one of the notes in Marcus's unmistakable handwriting. "Emphasize that he's never home anyway." My family was still celebrating in the living room, oblivious to the financial time bomb I had just discovered. Marcus laughed loudly at one of Uncle Robert's jokes, his performance as the carefree brother almost convincing. Almost. I watched him for a few minutes, noticing signs that had previously gone unnoticed. The clothes that were too expensive for his salesman's salary. The new watch that cost more than my car. The way he avoided looking directly at me since I arrived. "Jesse." My mother appeared at my side, her voice carrying that forced familiarity she always used when she needed something. "I'm so glad you're here. I was telling Cousin Helen about your important work." Important work. Again that tone that turned an achievement into an inconvenient burden. "Actually, Mom, I just received an international award for my research," I replied, watching her reaction. "The Seattle Oncology Institute has classified our work as groundbreaking." She blinked a few times, clearly not knowing how to respond. "Oh, that's wonderful, dear. You can tell everyone at dinner." But before I could respond, Marcus appeared between us. "Brother, we need to talk," he said, his hand weighing heavily on my shoulder with a familiarity that now disgusted me. "About some ideas I have for maximizing our investment here." Our investment. As if he had contributed equally to the purchase of the house. "Sure," I replied, keeping my voice neutral. "But first, can you explain why I found people going through my confidential research?" A muscle in Marcus's jaw twitched. It was just the uncles wanting to rest a little. No big deal. Nothing much. My voice rose an octave. "Marcus, this is classified research. A breach like this could cost me not only my job, but millions in lawsuits." "You're overreacting," my mother interjected quickly. "It's family, Jesse. They're not going to do anything with his lab stuff." His lab stuff. 5 years of work that could save thousands of lives, reduced to lab stuff. "Besides," Marcus added, that fake smile returning to his face, "it's not like you're going to stay here forever, right? I mean, with all your academic success, you'll probably get offers from bigger universities, more important places." More important places. Far away from here. Away from the house I had helped buy. That's when I understood the whole strategy. It wasn't just about money. It was about making me feel like I didn't belong there, that my presence was temporary and inconvenient. Years of subtle comments about my unstable career, about how I was never home anyway, about how it would be better for everyone if I invested my money in something more practical. "Actually," I said, deciding to test a theory, "I'm thinking of setting up a home lab in the basement. Turning this place into my permanent operations center." The change in Marcus's expression was instantaneous. Pure panic, barely concealed by an attempt at a smile. "Oh, I don't know if that's. I mean, it would be too noisy for the neighbors, wouldn't it? And dangerous, my mother added quickly. Imagine if there were an accident with chemicals. Chemicals. They didn't even know what kind of research I was doing, but they were already raising objections. How interesting, I muttered, watching them exchange nervous glances. You seem to have given a lot of thought to my presence here. It's not that, Marcus said quickly. It's just that, well, you know how it is. Family needs space to grow, and with Stephanie and me thinking about having kids. Ah, there it was. The real motivation behind this whole charade. Kids, I repeated slowly. And you'd need more space for that. Well, yes, Stephanie piped in as if she'd been summoned, her fake smile shining. And honestly, Jessie, you hardly ever use this place. It would be so much more efficient if I sold my share to you, I finished her sentence for her. An awkward silence settled between us. In the background, the sounds of the party continued, cousins chatting, children playing, music playing. But our little circle had turned into a silent battlefield. It's not about forcing you out, Marcus said finally, his voice taking on that condescending tone I'd known since childhood. It's about doing what's best for everyone. You could invest the money in something that really aligns with your professional goals. Like what? Well, you've always talked about opening your own research lab, right? This would be the perfect startup capital. Startup capital. For something I had never mentioned wanting. Marcus, I said calmly, when exactly did I talk about opening my own lab? He hesitated, realizing he had revealed too much. Well, I figured it was something you'd like to do. With all your success and everything. And assuming I wanted to do that, have you figured out how much my share of the house would be? Well, considering the current market and maintenance costs, he began, clearly prepared for this conversation. 200,000, Stephanie interrupted. It's fair, considering you never contributed to the improvements we made. Improvements they made. To my house. Without my consultation or approval. 200,000, I repeated, doing the math in my head. The house was worth at least 400,000 in the current market. My half should be worth at least 210,000, not considering the appreciation over the last 2 years. It's a generous offer, my mother added, considering all the circumstances. All things considered. As if my presence was a complication that warranted a discount. What if I refuse? The question hung in the air like a threat. Marcus and Stephanie exchanged glances again, that silent communication between couples that excludes everyone else. Well, Marcus said slowly, we hope you won't refuse. It would be complicated for everyone. Complicated. An interesting word. Complicated how? Jessie, my mother interjected, her voice taking on that manipulative maternal tone, you don't want to cause family problems over money, do you? Your father would be very disappointed. My father, who had died 3 years ago, before he could see how his family had become a financial manipulation machine. My father, I replied carefully, taught me that a man protects his investments and doesn't let anyone take advantage of him. Especially family. The silence that followed was deafening. That's when I realized something else. During this entire conversation, none of my relatives had approached us. The party continued a few feet away, but our group was isolated, as if there were an invisible bubble around us. They knew. They all knew that this wasn't really a family reunion. It was a financial ambush, carefully orchestrated, using nostalgia and emotional manipulation as weapons. And while Marcus tried to maintain his facade as a concerned brother, while my mother pretended to be mediating a normal family conflict, I was already 3 steps ahead, calculating not only how to escape this trap, but how to turn it into something they would never expect. Because Marcus had made one crucial mistake, he had underestimated exactly who he was trying to fool. And now that I understood the game they were playing, it was time to change the rules. The tension in the air was palpable as my Aunt Helen approached our group, carrying an old photo album. Jessie, dear. How nice to see you, she said, hugging me with genuine affection. Marcus was showing us all the improvements you've made to the house. How proud your parents would be to see how well you've taken care of the family estate. Family estate. Interesting how quickly my home had become everyone's estate. Actually, Aunt Helen, I replied calmly, I financed most of those improvements. The new kitchen, the heating system, the back deck. Marcus quickly interrupted me. Brother, Let's not get into financial details in front of the family. Why not? I asked, keeping my voice neutral. I thought transparency was important in a family. We continued to the second floor, where I found more violations of my privacy. My room had been prepared to impress visitors. Personal items had been rearranged, photographs of me replaced with family photos. "What a beautiful room," Aunt Helen commented. "Stephanie, you have such a talent for decorating." "Thank you," Stephanie replied, beaming with satisfaction. "We're thinking of expanding into the office as well, turning it all into a master suite suitable for a growing family." "About that," I said, deciding to test how far they would go, "I'm considering using the office to expand my home research. Installing specialized equipment." The reaction was immediate and revealing. "Absolutely not," Marcus said sharply. "That would be dangerous and probably illegal in a residential area." "Actually," I replied calmly, "I've already checked with the local authorities. It's perfectly legal for basic research." The lie came out naturally, but their reaction was even more revealing, pure panic. "Jesse," my mother said quickly, "you can't turn our house into a laboratory." Our house. As if she had invested a penny in buying it. That's when Marcus lost his composure. "Listen here," he said, his voice taking on that authoritative tone. "This house is important to our entire family. You can't make unilateral decisions. Like a meeting of 57 people without consulting me? That's different." "How?" "Because we live here. This is our primary residence. To you, it's just an investment." "Really?" I pulled out my phone. "Marcus, how about we review the mortgage payment records for the last 5 years?" His face paled instantly. "Look," Marcus said, trying to regain control, "the important thing is that we find a solution that works for everyone. One that recognizes the needs of a growing family," Stephanie said, placing her hand on her belly in a gesture that seemed rehearsed. "Especially now that we're expecting." The silence that followed was deafening. Expecting. She was pregnant. When? I asked when the noise of congratulations died down. 12 weeks, Stephanie replied. 12 weeks. Which meant they'd known for at least a month. Enough time to plan an elaborate family reunion and coordinated pressure to remove me from the house. "Congratulations," I said sincerely. Despite everything, a baby was a blessing. But I also recognized the move for what it was, the final emotional play. "So you'll consider our offer?" Marcus asked, his confidence returning. "About selling my share for $200,000? Of course I'll consider it. But I'll also get an independent professional appraisal." Relief turned to alarm again. Before they could respond, we heard commotion from downstairs. Loud voices, something breaking, a child screaming. We rushed down to find chaos in the kitchen. One of the cousins had knocked over my $1,500 Italian coffee maker. Shards of glass covered the floor, hot coffee splattered across the cabinets. "It wasn't his fault," the child's mother said defensively. "These things should be put away when there are children in the house." "It happens," Marcus said with a shrug. "It was just a coffee maker." It was just a coffee maker. As if $1,500 were irrelevant. "We'll replace it, of course," she added quickly. "With what money?" I asked calmly. The question hung in the air like an accusation. "Jesse," my mother said reproachfully, "they're just material things. Family is more important." It was at that moment, kneeling on the floor cleaning up the pieces of my destroyed coffee pot, that something changed in me forever. For years, I had accepted being the distant brother, the son who was too focused on work. I had allowed my physical absence to be interpreted as a lack of emotional investment in the family. But now I saw the truth clearly. My family didn't see me as a person with feelings and rights of my own. I was a resource to be managed, a problem to be solved. And I was tired of being treated like that. I discreetly took a photo of the wreckage. Documentation for insurance, I told myself. But deep down, I knew it was more than that. It was evidence. "Don't worry about it," I said, getting up. "Accidents happen." Marcus seemed relieved by my seemingly calm response. "I'm glad you understand, brother. That's what I've always admired about you. You don't get attached to material things." "I don't get attached to material things." but I do get attached to respect. And as the party continued around us, as my family celebrated their elaborate reunion at my house without my consultation, one thing became perfectly clear. If they wanted to play the family manipulation game, I was about to show them how someone with a medical education, financial resources, and 5 years of experience solving complex problems plays that game. And unlike them, I wouldn't leave any traces. 3 days have passed since the meeting. 3 days of calculated silence while my family interpreted my apparent calm as resigned acceptance. Marcus called daily. "Brother, I've been thinking about our conversation. How about we meet to discuss the details of the sale? I can make you a more formal offer." Each call revealed more urgency in his voice. Stephanie's pregnancy was being used as constant emotional leverage, and my mother had stepped up her unannounced visits to my apartment, always with some demand disguised as family concern. "Jesse, you seem distant lately," she said during one of these invasions, rummaging through my closets as she spoke. "I hope you're not holding a grudge over a little misunderstanding." A little misunderstanding. 57 people in my house without my permission was now a little misunderstanding. But while they interpreted my silence as passivity, I was busy with something very different. On Monday, I scheduled an appointment with Barbara Reynolds, the real estate lawyer who had helped me with the purchase of the house. On Tuesday, I contacted Precision Property Appraisals for a formal independent appraisal of the property. On Wednesday, I did something that would change everything. I called Dr. Morrison, director of the International Medical Research Institute in Zurich. "Jesse, what a coincidence." Her voice carried genuine enthusiasm. "I just received the report on your presentation in Seattle. Impressive results." "Thank you, Dr. Morrison. Actually, I'm calling about an opportunity you mentioned last year. The possibility of coordinating an international research project." "Ah, yes. We are still looking for the ideal candidate to head our new oncology center in Zurich. It's a 3-year position with the possibility of extension. Competitive salary, state-of-the-art laboratory, and an international team. I'm interested in exploring that possibility." The silence on the other end of the line was followed by a surprised laugh. "Jesse, that's fantastic. Can I set up a video conference for Friday? I just need to confirm a few bureaucratic details, but I can tell you that your application will be very welcome." I hung up the phone with a crystal-clear plan forming in my mind. On Thursday, Marcus showed up at my door unannounced, carrying a briefcase and that confident smile he always wore when he thought he was in control. "Brother, I brought the documents we discussed. A formal proposal for the purchase of your share." I let him in, offered him coffee, for my new makeshift equipment, since my Italian coffee maker was still in pieces, and sat down to listen to his presentation. "Talking with Stephanie and our mother, we came up with a figure we consider more than fair," he said, opening the briefcase with the drama of someone who believes he is doing a favor. $250,000. That's $50,000 more than our initial offer. $250,000. For a property I knew was worth at least $420,000 in the current market. "That's a generous offer," I replied calmly, watching his face light up. "Exactly. And look, we already have the financing approved. We can close the deal by the end of the week." By the end of the week. The urgency was revealing. "Marcus, may I ask why the rush?" He hesitated only a fraction of a second, but it was enough. "Well, you know how it is. Stephanie is pregnant, and we want to get these financial matters settled before the baby arrives. Establish a stable environment." "I understand completely," I said, leaning forward with apparent interest. "By the way, how are things financially? I know the insurance market has been volatile." The change in his expression was subtle but noticeable. "We're fine. In fact, better than ever. That's why we can make such a competitive offer." Better than ever. Interesting description for someone with collection notices piled on his desk. "That's great to hear. And the home expansion plan you mentioned?" "Oh yes." His confidence returned. "We're going to convert his space into a master nursery and maybe a home office for Stephanie. She's thinking about starting an interior design consulting business. A business that would depend on having an impressive home to use as a showcase." "Sounds like a solid plan," I agreed. "Can I have a few days to review the documents?" Sure. But Jesse," his voice took on that manipulative brotherly tone, I hope you don't complicate this unnecessarily. Family should be simple, you know. Family should be simple. From someone who had orchestrated an elaborate family reunion to pressure me. After he left, I called Barbara. The documents your brother presented are technically legal, she explained after reviewing everything, but the value is significantly below market. And there are some interesting clauses about the move timeline that seem rushed. Like what? They're asking you to vacate the property within 2 weeks of closing. That's a very short time frame for a family settlement. These transitions usually take at least a month. 2 weeks. Hardly enough time to organize an international move. Barbara, I need you to prepare some documents for me. And maybe do some discreet checks on Marcus's financial situation. I can do that. But Jesse, may I ask what his plan is? I'm still deciding between a few options, I replied. But one thing is certain, I will not be pressured into making a decision that only benefits them. That evening, I received a call from Stephanie. Jesse, I know it may seem like we're pressuring you, but we need an answer by Sunday. Her voice carried that artificial sweetness I was learning to detect. We have other investors interested in the property if you two decide to sell. Other investors. The veiled threat was clear. Take our offer or lose control completely. I understand, I replied simply. Great. Marcus will be so relieved. We knew you'd be reasonable. Reasonable. That was what they expected of me. On Friday, I had my video conference with Dr. Morrison and the Zurich team. The conversation went better than I had expected. We should have a definitive answer for you by Tuesday, Dr. Morrison said. And Jesse, can I be frank? Your research results are exactly what we were looking for. The position is yours if you want it. Zurich. 3 years of funded research, state-of-the-art equipment, and a safe distance from family manipulation. But first, I had a weekend to sail. If you've been following this family manipulation story and wondering how anyone could turn a seemingly hopeless situation into victory, keep watching because what happened on Sunday would forever change the power dynamics in my family. Saturday dawned with Marcus knocking on my door at 9 in the morning, accompanied by a man in a suit whom he introduced as our real estate agent. We thought we'd bring in a professional to facilitate the process, Marcus explained, that forced smile firmly in place. The agent, a nervous man named Steve, immediately began pointing out structural problems that would justify the reduced price Marcus was offering. As you can see, he said, pointing to a barely noticeable crack in the living room wall, there are some signs of settling that could indicate future problems. Problems that didn't exist 6 months ago when I had done a thorough inspection. But while Steve fabricated defects and Marcus nodded gravely, as if these findings were a surprise to him as well, I was mentally calculating the exact value of my revenge. Because they had made a fatal mistake, they had completely underestimated who they were dealing with. And on Sunday, when our entire family gathered again for what Marcus promised would be a little celebration of the deal, they would discover that the passive Jesse they knew was gone forever. The real question wasn't whether I would accept their offer. It was whether they were prepared for the consequences of trying to cheat me. Sunday arrived with the kind of sunny morning that seemed to mock the storm that was about to erupt. Marcus had organized what he called a small family celebration to seal our agreement. My mother, Stephanie, some of my uncles who had stayed for the weekend, and the broker Steve were all gathered in my living room to witness my wise decision. Jesse, I'm so glad you've decided to be reasonable, my mother said, hugging me with that performative affection that always preceded awkward moments. Family is everything, and you're doing the right thing. The right thing. Interesting how quickly my surrender had become a moral virtue. Marcus was beaming, arranging the documents on the coffee table like a conqueror displaying trophies. Steve, the broker, looked nervous, probably because he knew exactly what he had been hired to do. So, Marcus said, rubbing his hands together, shall we finalize this? Steve has brought all the necessary documents. Actually, I replied calmly, before we sign anything, there's some information I think you should all know. I took a folder out of my backpack and placed it on the table next to Marcus's documents. What's that? Stephanie asked, her voice carrying a note of alarm. The independent appraisal I ordered on Friday, I explained, opening the folder to reveal the official report. You remember? I mentioned it would be important to have an updated market value. The change in atmosphere was instantaneous. Marcus leaned forward, trying to read the document upside down. And what was the result? He asked, trying to keep his tone casual. According to Precision Property Appraisals, our house is currently worth $420,000. My half, therefore, is worth $210,000. The silence that followed was deafening. That's inaccurate, Steve said quickly. The market is volatile. These appraisals can vary dramatically. They can, I agreed. That's why I also requested a second opinion from Metropolitan Real Estate. Result? $415,000. Pretty close to the first appraisal. Marcus was turning visibly pale. Jesse, he said, trying to regain control, those appraisals don't take into account transaction costs, taxes, potential problems. You're right, I interrupted. That's why I also consulted a lawyer who specializes in real estate law. I pulled another document from the folder. Barbara Reynolds reviewed all of our original co-ownership documents. She discovered some interesting things about our financial contributions over the years. Marcus's breathing was getting faster. For example, I continued, consulting the document, of the $160,000 invested in home improvements over the past 5 years, $142,000 came from my accounts. That includes the new kitchen you so proudly showed off to your relatives. My mother was looking between Marcus and me with growing understanding. Marcus, she said slowly, you said you contributed equally to the improvements. Marcus stammered. There's more, I continued, pulling out another set of documents. Barbara also conducted a discreet financial check, as is standard in family real estate transactions. That's when Marcus fully understood what was happening. Jesse, you can't, he began. $58,000 in credit card debt, I read aloud. 3 foreclosure notices on the apartment you guys own as an investment. A defaulted commercial loan for Stephanie's consulting business. Stephanie gasped. How did you get this information? It's public record, I replied simply. Available to anyone who knows where to look. Marcus was standing now, his hands shaking slightly. That's invasion of privacy. It's due diligence, I corrected. Especially considering you were trying to pressure me into accepting half the market value of my property to solve financial problems I didn't know existed. The silence in the room was oppressive. Steve was discreetly putting away his documents, clearly recognizing that his work there was done. But wait, I said, smiling for the first time in days. I'm not done yet. I took out my phone and placed it on the table. On Tuesday, I received a call from Dr. Morrison, director of the International Medical Research Institute in Zurich. They offered me the position of Cancer Research Coordinator. Marcus sat down heavily, as if his legs could no longer support him. 3 years in Switzerland, I continued. A salary of $200,000 a year, plus benefits. State-of-the-art laboratory, international staff, unlimited funding for my research. Are you going to take it? My mother asked in a low voice. I already have, I replied calmly. I'm leaving in 6 weeks. The revelation hit Marcus like a physical blow. But what about the house? What about our agreement? Oh, about that, I said, taking the last document from the folder. Since I'll be away for 3 years, I've hired Elite Property Management to manage my half of the house. I placed the contract on the table. They'll find qualified tenants for my half. Rent will be $1,800 a month, considering the current market value. You'll continue to pay your share of the mortgage, obviously. Marcus was staring at the document as if it were a death sentence. $1,800. We can't afford that on top of our share of the mortgage. Then maybe you should consider selling, I suggested gently. On the open market, for what it's worth. We'll split the profits 50-50, as originally agreed. Jesse, Stephanie said, her tears finally coming, we're expecting a baby. We can't move now. You should have thought of that before you tried to cheat me, I replied, keeping my voice neutral. Before you organized an elaborate family meeting to pressure me. Before you lied about property values and hid financial problems. Marcus finally exploded. You can't do this. We're family. You can't destroy our life over money. Money. I stood up, looking him straight in the eye. Marcus, this was never about money. It was about respect. I walked to the window, looking out at the street where, a week ago, 57 cars had parked for a party I didn't know was happening in my own home. You spent years treating me like an inconvenient obstacle. My research was irrelevant work, my absence proof that I didn't care about the family. When you needed my house to impress relatives, you simply took it. When you needed my money to solve financial problems, you invented a family crisis to manipulate me. I turned back to them. You never considered including me in decisions because you never saw me as an equal. I was just the distant brother with money who could be manipulated when necessary. That's not true, my mother protested weakly. It isn't. I picked up my phone again. Mom, when was the last time you asked me about my research? Not to dismiss it as lab work, but to really understand what I do. She didn't answer. Marcus, when was the last time you consulted me about an important decision regarding our shared property before simply assuming I would agree? Again, silence. The truth is, you don't respect me. You never have. And when I finally make a decision based on my own best interests, suddenly I'm the one destroying the family. Marcus had his head in his hands. Jesse, please. We can work this out. We can talk like a real family. We can, I agreed. But first, you need to understand something fundamental. I am no longer the Jesse who passively accepts whatever you decide. I am a respected international researcher, co-owner of a valuable property, and someone who has learned to value his own time and energy. I walked toward the door. The property management documents are in order. Barbara can answer any legal questions you may have. The management company will be in touch next week to discuss the tenant selection process. Where are you going? Stephanie asked. Zurich, I replied simply. To start working on research that could save thousands of lives. Something that, ironically, you never managed to value properly. I paused at the door and turned around one last time. Oh, and Marcus? Next time you want to organize a family reunion at my property, a simple text message would suffice. Basic courtesy, you know. As I walked out of the house, my house, for the last time as a resident, I heard Marcus yelling something about lawsuits and Barbara calmly responding that he was welcome to try. 6 weeks later, I was on a plane to Zurich, carrying 2 suitcases and the certainty that sometimes the best revenge isn't destroying your opponents, but simply refusing to continue playing by their rules. And my family? Well, they were learning a valuable lesson about the consequences of underestimating people you think you can manipulate. A lesson that, apparently, would cost exactly $1,800 a month. 2 years later, I got an unexpected call from Marcus. Jesse. His voice sounded tired, different from the arrogant tone I knew. Can I talk to you? I was in my lab in Zurich, analyzing results that could revolutionize pediatric cancer treatment. My research had advanced beyond my wildest expectations. Sure, I replied, genuinely curious. I wanted to apologize. The words came out forced. You were right about everything. We lost the house last month. The tenants on your side were our only source of stable income, but even so, we couldn't keep up with the payments. The irony didn't escape me. The income from my property had become their lifeline. Stephanie moved back in with her parents with Emily. I'm staying with our mom temporarily. He paused. She wanted to talk to you too. Hello, Jesse. My mother's voice was softer, stripped of its manipulative authority. Your brother told me about your research in the papers. Treatments that save children. It's what I've always done, Mom. You just never paid attention. I know. The admission came as a whisper. We spent years treating you as if you were disposable. As if your presence was an inconvenience. When you left, I realized we had lost the only member of the family who was actually building something meaningful. I looked out the lab window at the snow-covered Alps. The view that woke me up every morning, reminding me how far I had come. Jesse, Marcus returned to the phone, I know I don't deserve forgiveness. But I want you to know that. I understand now. You didn't punish us. You just refused to be used. What about the house? We sold it for market value. Her half is in the account you specified, with interest. $425,000. The money they tried to steal from me for $250,000. Thank you, I said simply. Jesse, my mother interjected again, we know you're fine without us. But could we try to be a real family this time? Respecting who you are. I considered the question. The anger had long since disappeared, replaced by something more valuable, self-respect. We can talk, I replied. But on different terms. As equals. We understand, Marcus said quickly. Totally. After hanging up, I returned to my experiments. Dr. Morrison stopped by the lab an hour later. How are the Phase 2 trials going? He asked. Promising. 82% complete remission in children with aggressive cancer. He smiled. Jesse, you realize you just revolutionized pediatric oncology, right? Yes, I did. And for the first time in my life, I had a family, my research team, who truly valued my work. As for my biological family, they learned a fundamental lesson. Respect isn't something you take. It's something you earn. The sweetest revenge wasn't seeing them lose their house. It was building a life where their approval became irrelevant. If this story of transformation and justice resonated with you, don't forget to subscribe to the channel. We have dozens of stories from people who refused to accept being disrespected and turned their pain into power. 3 years later, when Emily, my niece, turned 5, Marcus sent me a picture of her wearing a toy lab coat. She says she wants to be like Uncle Jesse when she grows up. Sometimes, the best revenge is simply becoming someone worthy of admiration.